In this video, we are going to learn how ovulation works. A woman's anatomy has several parts. The woman's reproductive system is the part of her body that allows her to have a baby. The uterus is the place inside you where your baby grows. The uterus is also known as the womb. The ovaries are where eggs are stored in your body. Women have 2 ovaries, one on each side of the uterus. The fallopian tubes are the tubes that connect your ovaries and your uterus. When your ovary releases an egg, it travels down one of the fallopian tubes to your uterus. Ovulation is when a woman's ovaries release an egg. An egg is released about 14 days before the first day of a woman's period. The egg then travels down one of the fallopian tubes. When a couple has sexual intercourse and does not use birth control around the time of ovulation, a man's sperm will swim to meet the woman's egg. When a sperm penetrates the egg, it's called fertilization or conception. The fertilized egg or embryo then travels to the woman's uterus. Here, the embryo attaches itself into the lining of the uterus and begins to grow. Now that we know what the woman's reproductive system looks like, we can begin to understand how ovulation works and ultimately, how she gets pregnant.
Each month, a woman's body goes through a cycle to prepare itself for a potential pregnancy. This cycle is called menstruation, and it lasts on average 28 days, but it can vary, lasting from 21 to 35 days. The menstrual cycle actually begins when the uterus sheds its lining through the vagina, resulting in what is commonly called your period. So the day bleeding begins is day 1 of your cycle. At this point, hormones from the brain trigger the development of eggs in the ovaries, which in turn produce estrogen. Only one egg fully matures within a protective sac, known as the follicle, and it continues to produce estrogen. This estrogen causes the lining of the uterus to thicken and to prepare for pregnancy. The mature egg is expelled from the ovary about 14 days after the cycle begins and starts its journey down the fallopian tube.
Within minutes of its release, the egg is guided by suction through the fringed opening of the outer end of the fallopian tube, starting it on a journey which will take 5 or 6 days as it passes down the tube and finally reaches the cavity of the uterus. Meanwhile, after the follicle ruptures, it is converted into this yellowish body known as the corpus luteum. Cells of the corpus luteum secrete the hormone progesterone, which brings about important changes in the lining of the uterus, preparing it for possible pregnancy. In fact, the lining of the uterus, known as the endometrium, undergoes changes in response to hormone levels during the cycle. In the first half of the cycle, known as the follicular phase, the developing follicle secretes increasing amounts of estrogen hormone, which encourages regeneration of the endometrium. After ovulation, there are important changes in the endometrium, aimed at making it suitable to receive a fertilized egg. These changes are brought about by a secretion of progesterone from the corpus luteum. The secretion of progesterone is maintained for several days, but if the egg is not fertilized in that time, the corpus luteum withers, and falling levels of progesterone and estrogen trigger the shedding of the uterine lining as the menstrual flow. The cycle then starts again. But if the egg is fertilized, no menstruation occurs, as the corpus luteum continues to function, secreting progesterone during the first 3 months of the pregnancy. Thereafter, numerous changes occur to support the developing embryo.
If a woman were to have sex at this point, this mucus would help nourish the man's sperm and help move them towards the egg for fertilization. If fertilization occurs, this newly formed embryo will travel down the fallopian tube to implant in the uterus, and pregnancy begins. If fertilization or implantation doesn't happen, the cycle begins again, and the egg is flushed out when the uterus sheds its lining at the beginning of a new menstrual cycle. If, on the other hand, you are sexually active but don't want to become pregnant, there are many birth control options available. You'll want to talk to your doctor about which might be right for you and consider the risks, effectiveness, and your lifestyle. By knowing how pregnancy works and by learning about your individual cycle, you can better plan and prepare for your future.